Jolly good to have your company. Welcome to the programme. What is a woman's role in 2020? We'll try asking the Tradwives, women who believe they should be looking after the home and submissive to their husbands. Is there anything wrong with that? You're watching Roundtable. Very warm welcome from me, David Foster. You could say they're going back to the future, relying on style and ideas from the 1950s. The Tradwife movement is apparently getting more and more followers, women looking to ditch careers in favour of life tending to hearth, home and husband.
The latest UK figures show that a record number of women are now working full-time jobs, but the Tradwives are not among them. Tradwives, traditional wives, are a growing community of women who are stepping back in time and, as they put it, submitting to their husbands, spending their days cooking, cleaning, and some even wearing 1950s attire. They're gaining thousands of followers in countries as diverse as the UK, Brazil, Germany, and Japan. To the Tradwives, the decision to shun a career is a positive choice. Becoming homemakers, mothers and wives is often described as a true calling. And they celebrate traditional ideas of feminine behaviour, so the Tradwife movement is often framed as a backlash against feminism. Many of the women in Tradwife groups also discuss the strain of working in demanding jobs and the difficulty of balancing that with home life. So is the growing new movement offering a challenge to modern conventions and even our ideas of feminism.
Let's get the conversation going. Joining us today, Alena Petitt, a proud Tradwife and founder of the Darling Academy, a website for traditional housewives and stay-at-home mums. With me in the studio, Stephanie Spencer, a professor of history who focuses on women's education. Dr. Shola Mos-Shogbamimu, lawyer and women's rights activist, and Angela Neustatter, a journalist and author of A Home for the Heart. Great to have you all here. I know you have different views, mostly to Alena, but we'll go into those in just a moment. Let's go to you first of all, Alena. You're in Cheltenham. You are a stay-at-home mum. Where did the idea of Tradwives come from?
Well, I don't know if it's so much, popped out from nowhere. I think women have been traditional housewives or housewives since the dawn of time. I just happen to have grown up in a generation that meant that in the kind of media narrative and also at school, it was not an option for me, even though that was my desire. We were constantly asked what we wanted to be when we grew up. I wanted to be a housewife and a mum, and I was shamed for it constantly, and I'm still getting shamed for it, funnily enough. I'm in my mid-30s. I've had quite a successful career in marketing, and now I'm staying at home to raise my son and run the household. And according to other people, it's not a career or a job or valuable or worthwhile.
Is it?
Is it what? A job?
Yeah.
I'm working constantly, yes, I would say so. I'm not, it's not gainful employment in the fact that I'm getting paid by somebody, but I am constantly working and very hard.
Okay, what do you make of this table? It's a conversation, so jump in any time you want to, Alena. What do you make of the front page of the Darling Academy's website, which says Tradwives and the new Stepford, homemakers of our generation happy to submit, to keep the house and spoil their husbands like it's 1959? Subservience or just a matter of personal choice?
Well, it seems to me, yes, in one way, it is a matter of personal choice. Of course it is. I worry about subservience to husbands because, as a feminist who's been involved in the 70s stuff, I have seen how important it is for women not to feel that they have got to submit to what a male idea is and that becomes sort of established. But I mean, certainly, I think if you want to be at home looking after your children and you want to be looking after a home, I would say that was a choice, but it has to be a choice, I guess, between the two of you, because if the man's going to be earning the money, he's got to be in on the bargain as well, really.
Exactly, and that's exactly it. That's what I'd like to clarify, actually. If you read that article, which is actually very long, it goes into what submission actually means for us in our dynamic of our family. Submission and subservience are not the same thing. In business, you have to submit to the decisions of a department head. So considering my husband is the main breadwinner, he's also self-employed. So with regards to budgeting, he needs to make certain decisions. So I trust him in order to do that. So I submit to his decision.
You don't feel you're second best in this relationship?
No, not at all, not at all. And he submits to me as well. It's about allowing the other person to flourish in the area that they have talents. Now, this could work the other way as well. Some women actually look after the budget for the household, the entire budget. I have quite plainly said, my husband's better at that than me, so I submit to his decisions because I trust him.
Okay.
Now, for me...
Can I just throw this one at you?
Yeah.
Alena says it's not subservience. It's give and take. It's backwards and forwards. It's part of a normal relationship.
I think very much that marriage, and in terms of its definition, should be individual. So to Alena and her husband, whatever that means in terms of submission to each other. Now, I want to quickly add that feminism for me, my kind of feminism embraces all brands of feminism, which means that for me, what underpins it is women have the right to choose whatever kind of lifestyle they want, and they have the right to choose that, and that's the premise of my activism as a women's rights activist. Now, stay-at-home moms are nothing new, right? Just like working moms are nothing new. Right. So when I hear the word traditional wives, Tradwives, I'm a traditional wife, and I'll tell you why. Because wives that have worked, and they predate those that have stayed at home. So if you go back centuries, in whichever culture you look at, women have worked their butts off, they've raised families, provided for the homes as well. They have predated those who stay. So I would describe myself as a traditional wife. I suppose where I will hold off is the whole subservient thing and the submission thing, because for me, just like Alena said, my husband and I submit to each other. I am a partner with my husband as opposed to submitting to him in terms of whether it's if you think about it for a second, I like to say that it is that women owe it to themselves to be independent of thought, to be independent of authenticity, and to also have economic means. I was brought up by a father who taught me and said to me, go out there and spread your wings, have a career, have children, do whatever the heck you want to do.
As long as my supper's ready at 6 o'clock.
Never. He never ever said that. And I was brought up by a mother who taught me that as a mother, my role would be to provide for my children and be a partner to my husband. She taught me about why it is important not to allow men to have this overwhelming responsibility of them just being on their own in providing for things.
Or perhaps a sense of power.
Exactly, because you also have to think about the mental health awareness.
I know
so
Alena wants to come in just a second, but Stephanie, you've been very patient for the time being. Say whatever you want to say, but I'm wondering if this is a backlash against the pressure that the modern woman feels to do something which is the exact opposite of what Alena's chosen to do.
Yes, I think there's a real misunderstanding about what the 1950s was all about. It was really tough for women, really, really tough, for whether you were working class, whether you were middle class. It wasn't the glamorous world of the magazine covers. I think the other problem that we have is this notion about a housewife. I don't want to be married to a house. I'm married to a man.
But is it a backlash?
No, I don't think so. I think it's, if you backlash, it suggests that you want to go, that there's something wrong, that you want to get rid of everything that's here at the moment.
But it also means that you're kicking against the current orthodoxy, which is perhaps that a woman should have everything: job, career, prospects, exciting life, children, home, etc., etc. And Alena, is this what you're saying? Is actually there's just too much pressure at the moment?
I think that's why people are actually so shocked about it, is the fact that I have decided that fulfillment was not found in a career for me. It was not found in the workplace. And you made a point about not being married to the house. I'm of course not married to the house, but I love my house. And I put my efforts into creating this soft place to land for my family. And that is where I find my fulfillment. And I'm not sure people...
I think what Alena is saying is very different.
Can we just bring in Angela
in
at this particular moment?
Okay.
I mean, I think if we're talking about this as a sort of a possibility for women, there is one problem, that for a lot of women, having to go out to work is not an option. They need the money. They can't, and the husband may not be able to earn enough for the house, or he may not have a job. I mean, there are all sorts of ways in which this particular option isn't open. It sounds to me like something that relies very much on a decent wage packet, perhaps an education that will get you there. And all that. But the other thing, sorry, that I was going to go on to say is that it does seem to me is that in the middle of all this is something that I consider quite integral, which is that I think careers, women's careers and men's careers, have got in the way of children having the degree of attachment and security that they need, and this goes right through the social classes. And I think, you know, I know, having had a career in the 70s, which I cherished very much, and I think I neglected my son because I went back to work when he was 4 months, because I was keen not to be seen to be less enthusiastic. And I cut back and went freelance for that reason. I went half and half, if you like. But I must say I would have found it very difficult not to work and to bring the outside world in to my husband and my child.
From what I'm hearing Alena say, I respect her right and her choice to be a stay-at-home mom. And I don't think that should even be in question for anybody out there, including feminists. I think perhaps what probably draws people back a bit is the whole submissive, subversive, and even the idea
And
that...
there is a traditional...
Yeah, but even the idea that women in the 50s were so glamorous, I bet you anything, those women who stayed at home would have loved to have the opportunity and the right to be able to choose to work and to be able to balance it all. Look, feminism is not just about let's get out there, kick men's butts, and have equal rights as men. It's about having equal outcomes. It's about having the right to choose your lifestyle. So I respect that. I know that personally for me, being at home would not work for me. I'm a better mother for being a career woman. Heck, my husband and children will probably petition to have me out of the house half the time.
But this is, Stephanie, you reckon this is a definite rejection of feminism?
Well, this is a rejection of feminism. No, I think it's a misunderstanding of feminism as being something where we denigrate the men. And I think what we're looking at is a much more equal type of collaborative partnership, maybe, rather than submission. I find the word submission quite difficult.
Yeah.
But
Can I just ask Alena a couple of things, if I may?
Could I just say something? Obviously, the press picked up on my blog and it's just run away with itself. What I would like to clarify is the fact that my husband are Christians and a lot of my audience are Christian women. So our understanding of submission and the role within the home falls under biblical principles. So
I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian, Alena.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, and I, you know, you're doing things that work for your family. We have made decisions that work for us. With regards to the finances as well, we've also had to make great kind of adjustments in our lifestyle in order to live the way we do. And I really want to clarify the fact that I'm not saying every woman has to live like this. I think the reason why we kind of defer to the 50s is that it was the last time that the housewife, as much as it was pretend, she was supported and
but she wasn't. So many of the women were going out to work.
No, but what I'm saying is,
And they were on, you know, mental health for women in the 1950s was really soaring. That's why we had the backlash from the 50s and the emergence of the women's movement in the 1960s.
I understand.
And can I just quickly add
it was
that
celebrated and it was an aspirational thing. Now, women, you know, represented as housewives in the media are miserable and they are depressed and their homes are prisons. And
I don't think that's necessarily the case. The reason why I mentioned earlier that, look, I'm a Christian too, so I understand the whole concept of submission. But even in my home, you see, God did not create me by accident. There's a reason why women like me, with my voice, with my opinion and my authenticity, exist. And that is because God expects me to use all that He's given me in my home, outside my home, and my husband appreciates that as well. But can I also just quickly add that in terms of how we start to represent what our values are as women, I am not just a mother and a wife. There's so much more to me than being a mother and a wife. So I love being a mother, I love being a wife, but there's so many other commas to my name.
I mean, the book I wrote, which I think is what brought me on here, is a book called A Home for the Heart, because I actually think home is a hugely important part of our lives. And I think people, as we know, who don't have homes or who live in wretched homes, I mean, they pay a very high price for that. And I think homes can be impoverished by lack of money and wealth, but also by lack of people in them, giving them heart and soul. And I think that's... And I do know that, I mean, like you, I love my home and I love being at home and I love being with my family. But I grew up in a different time to you, obviously. And for me, having a career was terribly important. It was something that I felt very strongly about and I had to do. And as I said, I think I overdid it. I neglected home and what it could represent for my children, I think.
So in a sense, are you applauding what Alena's doing? Because
I'm
you're
saying that it's worth
having
listening.
both, trying to get both didn't work for you.
Well, it did, hang on, it did work for me. I mean, I've been lucky and I was able to go freelance. If I hadn't, I'm not sure how it would have been. But I think what I'm saying is I worry about anything that's going to take us back to the idea that women need to have men there to be able to be themselves, to be secure, to feel that that they will let men make decisions because the world feels safer for them that way, because it isn't, and so much demonstrates
Okay,
that.
I want to ask
Alena
Alena
a
something,
question?
please. Can I just ask her this? In practical terms, what does your husband do around the house? And you write that he takes care of you. I'm sure you feel you take care of him as well. But in what way, other than financially, with the burdens, the jobs you have to do, does he take care of you? What does he do?
I mean, he helps out. He makes a cup of tea every morning. He helps me make the bed. He does all the dirty jobs around the house, like emptying the rubbish. With regards to care, I'm not this put upon housewife who's kind of picking up after him and he's leaving kind of like trails of socks everywhere. He's very considerate, but we are a real team, and we look after each other emotionally as well. It's just in our household there's a real division of labour. So I release him from the majority of the household tasks to concentrate on his work, which he does enjoy.
And I should point out you have one son.
Household tasks. Pardon?
You have one son.
We do, yes.
And your husband does all the jobs. I don't know whether it's still nappy changing or whether it's sort of wiping the nose or running to
Our son is
school.
7. So, yeah, we've passed that stage, thankfully. But he spends a lot of time with him. They have boy time together. We are, at the core of it, a very normal family. It's just that there is a very clear division of labour in our household, which means that we're not arguing over who does what. And we used to do that when I was working. Actually, this is a lifestyle that's really working for us. And I've never said every woman has to be like this. And the women that follow me and seek advice from me, I'm not dragging them off the streets by their hair. They're looking for someone to mentor them in this lifestyle.
So perhaps, yes, Stephanie, but can I just put perhaps this idea has been misrepresented as going back to prehistoric times for women.
Definitely.
When in fact,
yes.
it actually is a reasonable division of labour that suits all the parties concerned.
It sounds exactly like the sort of division of labour that we have in our household. You know, there are some things that I'm good at cooking, he's good at cleaning, so I do the cooking and he does the cleaning.
Yeah. I think people
but what I wanted to ask you, and I'm really interested in how your movement is developing, because if you're looking back to what was going on in the 1950s, a lot of women who were stay-at-home housewives did an enormous amount of charity work, and part of the problem that happened in the 60s and 70s as people went back to work was that there was a dearth of women who were doing that caring. Now, are you encouraging in your movement, are you encouraging women to get out and to get involved in charity work, to get involved in societies like the Mothers' Union, like the British Federation of Women Graduates, like the WVS? Is that part of the Tradwife package? Because it certainly was in the 50s and in the Victorian time.
Yes, I mean, I think the good thing is that, you know, if we run our households really efficiently, we are able to work out in the community as well. There are plenty of mothers who help out in the local schools. There are members of the WI. There are people that care for elderly relatives as well. So it's a real sense of community really comes into it as well. I think it can be incredibly isolating just to stay at home all the time. So part of what I teach is how to run the household efficiently to not only create space and time to help other people, but do things for yourself as well. Socialise, indulge in hobbies, you know, educate yourself in certain things. It's not about literally being chained to the sink.
But isn't that because there are people who are owning your narrative? Because to be honest with you, what you're saying to me is very different from the perception out there. And I think the reality of it is because what you are actually saying, which for me is a representation of a brand of feminism, right, is not what is being projected out there. And if you're going to own the narrative around this, I think you need to step out in front of it. So stay-at-home moms, like I said, there are women who have always been stay-at-home moms, and women, they're adding invaluable contribution, not just to their family, but to the entire nation for doing that. And then there are mothers and, wives like me who work. So we're career mothers, so to speak, but we're also adding invaluable contribution. All of that is perfectly okay. But when you throw words like submission and subservient into it, that is regressive.
And
that does sound regressive.
Well,
Going
I never said the word
backwards.
subservient.
Okay,
I never
see.
said subservient.
Right. See, again, somebody's taking the narrative and running away with it, trying to make you
I'm
all...
challenging. This is exactly what I'm doing. I'm challenging.
And how much of a response have you had?
Do you know what? The response has actually been overwhelmingly positive. The negative response, as you can understand or probably think of, has been horrific. So likening me to the Third Reich, calling me racist, calling me a white supremacist is just absolutely ridiculous. But that just, I don't know, comes part and parcel with putting yourself out there. But there are women who are emailing me and saying, I am so glad that there is someone who is shining a light on the value of housewives, even working women who love their work at home as well, because it's essentially two jobs. They're having to balance two jobs. They're getting praised in the boardroom, but then they're not getting praised at home. So this is the whole 1950s thing. It was an aspirational thing. They really dressed it up and made it a beautiful thing to want to be a good housewife. Now to want to be a good housewife, it seems like we're Stepford wives and we've had a lobotomy.
Angela, what do you make of what you've heard?
Well, I don't altogether agree with that. I think I can think of a lot of women, and some who don't work, in fact, and some who do, but who actually do value housework and who enjoy it and see it as having, and take a delight in their home being nice, all those things. I don't actually think that gets pushed out the window because you work and because you value yourself as a worker in the outside world, and perhaps bringing in ideas that you might not be exposed to otherwise. There are many, what I would call soft political reasons why being a woman working out in the world has a value that you do bring into the home, I think. But I also think that, yes, I get great satisfaction when I make something look nice at home. My old man is far better at cleaning up than I am and lets me know it, so I don't take much satisfaction in that. But I do actually think it's a shame that these things are being pulled so far apart, because I think actually in a funny way what you're saying is right, that we all overlap much more. But getting back to your central idea, I think, what seems to me utterly essential is whether it's going to be you stay at home and don't work out in the world, or whether you do a bit of each or whatever. It's got to be in agreement with the other person, not because the other person says you should or shouldn't work.
No, I completely agree.
That permission stuff.
What do we make of this? We've got to wrap this up pretty quickly. Disturbingly misogynistic conference run only by men pledges to, quote, make women great again. It will focus on how to destroy the feminist establishment, become the ultimate wife, and get pregnant and have unlimited babies.
This
Florida,
is exactly,
this May.
But this is exactly what I'm saying, that if the narrative of those who are saying, I'm proud to be a housewife, and this is my choice, and this is... If that narrative is not owned by them, it will be taken by alt-right platforms such as this. And I do think, just as a last point for me, I do think that women owe it to themselves to have economic means. One of the things my mother taught me was, it is my role as a mother, as a wife, to provide for my children. You never know what's going to happen in the future.
So perhaps your husband should pay you for the work you do, Alena?
Well, he does in a roundabout way, doesn't he? See, this is the thing. How can we then rely upon husbands during our maternity leave? A lot of housewives are industrious. We have little side hustles, as you call it.
That's right.
And they have for a long time. In fact, even 30, 40 years ago, they used to take in extra children or extra washing or ironing.
I think they did a few more things than that.
Businesses, some run businesses, on the side.
I'm talking about base level stuff, like easy stuff to kind of get hold of. But that essentially, you've got to be quite careful there, because if you do just want to be a housewife, how are you able to make that extra money?
Okay, can I just wrap it up in the studio? Alena, it's been fascinating talking to you. Stephanie, do you ever see a time when you might have liked the sort of life that Alena's aspiring to?
Oh, I've done it. I did it for 5 or 6 years.
And?
And now I'm a full-time professor. it's fine, but it wasn't particularly fulfilling for me, and I can combine everything fine. What I would like to say is that I think part of the problem is that you are looking too far backwards and don't use the ideas of tradition or the 1950s because they are so problematic. Talk about moving forwards, build on what we've got. We don't want to go back to when most women left school at 15 and all they could do was clean a house.
OK, final last word, Alena. I think you've got to be able to reply to that, and then we'll say thank you to everybody.
Yeah, do you know what? People identify where they feel most comfortable, and that's a basic right, I think, and a feminist right, to be able to identify with vintage things. That's as complex as it gets.
Listen, thank you very, very much indeed. Angela, thank you for your time.
Pleasure.
Remind us of the title of your book again.
It's called A Home for the Heart.
A Home for the Heart. Thank you, Shola. Thank you very much, Stephanie, Alena. Thank you very much indeed. I suppose what we've established on this programme is that a woman's place is wherever she wants it to be.
Right. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
I knew
you can send them to me and I'll sort them out.
I knew as soon as I said that I'd get a reaction. Alena, thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much for watching this edition of Roundtable. From me, David Foster, from the team. We'll see you next time, I hope. Goodbye for now.